When we talk about bus accident claims, most clients start off just with no idea in terms of how to value their claim. So a question we get a lot is, how do I value my claim here in Mississippi? And particularly, for instance, on a bus wreck case, how do you value that claim? And the basic types of damages, in terms of how you assess and the process you go through and the things you look for on damages are going to be similar on a bus wreck as they would be on for instance, a car wreck or a wreck involving an 18-wheeler or other forms of personal injury cases. The way that we work up and prove a bus wreck case, though, would be very different because the vehicle itself involved is different. Different layers of regulation involved. You got to think about different standard of driver's license for that driver. But in terms of the injured person's damages, here in Mississippi, and this is going to be similar in most states, the broad categories of damages are economic damages, non-economic damages, and then there's a category of punitive damages that can regularly become involved in significant cases like a bus wreck case, for instance. Because, again, being highly regulated, we don't want bus wrecks regularly. We want to discourage behavior that would lead to those. So punitive damages sometimes come into play on a case like that more frequently and in larger amounts than in other cases. But let's just talk through each of those real quick. So using the example of a bus wreck, an injured person, economic damages, those are the damages that we can put a dollar amount next to that show actual economic loss of that victim. The actual economic loss, for instance, could be past medical bills, any future medical bills or medical treatment the victim is going to need, lost wages in the past, lost wages in the future, and that could be from not being able to work at all. For instance, in the situation of a catastrophic injury, if we're talking a wrongful death case, that person's obviously not going to be able to work again if they're deceased. So the wrongdoer has to compensate for that lost income in the future. For others, perhaps there's an injury or some type of personal or a permanent disability that happened as a result of the injury. That means they may be able to work, but they may not be able to do what they once did or what they would have been doing had it not been for the injury. And so in that situation, economic damages would include lost earning capacity, which doesn't mean you completely lose all income in the future, but the party that caused and is responsible for that injury should have to pay that difference between what you would have made and what you're going to make now. Obviously any property damage might come up, but all of these things are economic damage, actual economic damages that we can show dollar amounts and prove what the value is. Non-economic damages, those are the damages that are more mental, emotional, pain, the damages that we all know are real, that the law recognizes as compensable, but they don't tie into a specific economic loss. So those are the things. Pain and suffering comes to mind, mental anguish, loss of enjoyment of life, loss of consortium, with a husband or a wife, or sons or daughters. That relationship, loss of that relationship, or impact on that relationship, whether it be because of the injury, but certainly in situations where there's death, that comes into play. All of the injuries that, again, you can't really pull out receipts, and you can't really pull out economic tables to show what that cost would be in the future, but it's those very real, emotional, physical, mental damages that we all know happen when there's a catastrophic injury or death. Well, all of those come into play, and particularly when you're talking in the context of something as severe as a bus wreck, where serious injury or death is likely, then usually those numbers can be significant. And then finally, the punitive damages that I mentioned category. That would be a category of damages where if it's shown that, for instance, the bus company or the company operating that bus, the operator had really done some conduct that just goes beyond the pale, that sort of shocks the conscience of someone in that position of trust and that responsibility of operating a vehicle like that multiple lives are entrusted to, and that is large and heavy and can do severe damage. In Mississippi, the standard for punitive damages is what we call willful, wanton, or reckless conduct with disregard for the safety of others. Other states, that threshold is defined differently, but most of them follow some similar pattern of that, of some form of willful conduct or really reckless conduct that that really endangers the public, or just conduct that just shocks the conscience. That's when a defendant can be exposed to punitive damages, and those come into play to the point of holding the wrongdoer accountable, but more than that, really punishing them for this outrageous conduct, and making an example of them so that other bus carriers, other people in trust in that position don't repeat that conduct, and so that others are not injured in the future as a result of similar conduct. It's really for a deterrent, for a punishment, to help protect the public. But in these types of cases, where we're talking about something that's catastrophic as a bus wreck, oftentimes punitives come into play, where they may not come into play in other cases. So those sort of briefly summarize all the different forms of damages that can come into play in a bus accident or an injury arising from a bus accident. And the important thing is that anyone with a potential claim arising from a bus wreck really needs competent, experienced trial counsel. You need representation by an attorney with experience on personal injury claims, experience with these types of claims, who know how to pursue and document every aspect of damages so that nothing's overlooked, but who's also prepared to litigate the case and to build the case to get full value for that client. I'm Brad Morris here at Brad Morris Law Firm, PLLC. We litigate personal injury cases every day. If you or a loved one have been injured in a bus wreck, we're here to answer your questions. Just reach out to us by our website or by phone, and we will do our best to get you pointed in the right direction, and most importantly, to get you the help that you need. Again, I'm Brad Morris, and I appreciate you taking the time to watch this video.